What happens when Donald Trump decides to take a swipe at Barack Obama's law degree on live television? At first, it sounds like just another insult in the endless back and forth between two political giants Trump has made a career out of. Mocking rivals, twisting words, and throwing sharp elbows in public. But this time, the stage was different. The audience was different. The response turned into something no one in the room was expecting to understand. Why this single moment became such a cultural earthquake, you need to picture the setup. This wasn't a political rally, wasn't a press briefing or a debate podium. This was late-night television. It's the kind of place where the audience is warm, the lights feel softer, and the conversation is supposed to glide between funny anecdotes. In serious reflection, people tune in for a mix of entertainment and insight. They want the jokes? Sure, but they also want the truth, delivered in a way that only certain guests can provide. And that night, the guest was none other than Barack Obama, calm, deliberate, unflappable Barack Obama. The man who made an entire political career out of being collected under pressure. The man who, no matter how sharp the question or how biting the attack, always seemed to have a line ready, sometimes serious, sometimes hilarious, but always landing exactly where it needed to. Now, imagine that atmosphere. The cameras are rolling. The band has just wrapped up its lively opening number. The host, leaning comfortably behind the desk, teases the night's big talking points. The crowd is already primed. They know who's waiting backstage, and the energy hums through the studio. When Obama finally walks out, the applause is thunderous. People rise to their feet, some clapping, some cheering, some just smiling ear to ear for a moment. It doesn't even feel like politics. It feels like a reunion. But here's where things shift. Because late night, as casual as it looks, has always been a minefield for politicians. The humor disarms. The audience feels looser, but the questions can be sharper than anything you'll hear at a press conference. A good host knows how to throw something unexpected, something designed to cut through the polished exterior and see how a guest really reacts. And that's exactly what happened. Somewhere between the laughter and the light banter, the host leaned in with that grin, the kind of grin that tells the audience, "Get ready, this is about to be good." And the setup came. "So, Mr. President," the host said, "Donald, Trump has been out there saying your Harvard law degree doesn't count for much." The audience laughed nervously. Some gasped, because they knew. Everyone knew. Mention Donald Trump in front of Barack Obama, and sparks could fly. Add in an insult about one of Obama's proudest achievements, the law degree that helped propel him from community organizer to professor. Senator and eventually President Hand, you've got a cocktail of tension and anticipation. For a split second, the room froze. You could almost feel the silence. The cameras zoomed in. The host leaned back just a little, almost bracing for whatever was about to come. The audience leaned forward, eyes locked on Obama, waiting. And that's the power of these moments. They're not scripted. They're not rehearsed. They live in the space between question and answer. In that fragile pause where anything can happen, would Obama brush it off with a joke? Would he give a serious defense of his record? Would he dodge the question entirely, the way so many politicians do when the heat is on? No one knew. And that's why the tension was electric. What happened next would leave the host doubled over, the audience roaring, and even legal experts on social media stunned by the precision of Obama's response. Because when Barack Obama finally leaned forward, smiled, and delivered his line, it didn't just answer the insult. It cut straight through it, flipped it inside out, and turned it into one of those late-night TV moments people replay for years. But before we get to the explosion, the line itself, you need to fully understand the stakes. This wasn't just about a degree. It wasn't about Harvard. It wasn't even really about Trump versus Obama, though that rivalry has its own long, tangled history. This was about something bigger: credibility, authority, the idea that words matter, education matters, preparation matters. And in an era where every credential gets questioned, where expertise itself is often under fire, Trump's jab carried weight. He wasn't just mocking Obama. He was mocking the very idea that in education, no matter how elite, could stand up against bravado and insult politics. That's why this mattered. That's why the crowd leaned in. And that's why, when the moment finally came, the response landed like a hammer wrapped in velvet, sharp, devastating, and impossible to ignore. What you're about to see is more than a clapback. It's more than a viral clip. It's a glimpse into why Barack Obama, even years after leaving office, still has the ability to turn an entire room, entire conversation, and sometimes an entire country on its head with nothing more than a single sentence. Because on that night, in that studio, under those lights, Donald Trump's insult about Obama's law degree didn't just bounce off. It backfired spectacularly, and it set the stage for a comeback that legal experts, political analysts, and millions of viewers would call one of the sharpest responses ever. It's delivered on live television. The thing about these kinds of showdowns is that they never come out of nowhere. They simmer, they build, they pull energy from years of tension, rivalry, and unspoken grudges, until suddenly they erupt in a single line that feels like it was destined to happen. And if you followed American politics, even casually, you know there's no tension quite like the one between Donald Trump and Barack Obama. Their history isn't just political, it's personal. From the infamous birther conspiracy, Trump pushed back in 2011 to the White House Correspondents Dinner, where Obama publicly roasted him in front of the entire D.C. elite. These two men have been locked in a strange dance of rivalry. For over a decade, every insult, every jab, every subtle wink of dismissal from Obama, every retaliatory snipe from Trump, it all stacks up like layers of a grudge match that never really ended. That's why the moment on late-night TV hit so differently. It wasn't just a random question tossed in for laughs. It was gasoline on an old fire. The host knew it. The audience knew it. And you could tell from the slight pause before asking the question that even the host was bracing for the impact. The conversation up until then had been light. Obama was his usual mix of sharp and self-deprecating, joking about his post-presidency hobbies, trading barbs with the band, even poking fun at his gray hair. The crowd loved it. This was the Obama they remembered, relaxed and witty. A reminder of a time when the country's politics felt at least a little more measured. And then the pivot came, that almost imperceptible shift in tone that seasoned. Interviewers are masters at the grin, the lean forward, the deliberate pause before speaking. The kind of move that says, all right, let's stop playing around for a second. Let's get to the good stuff. So, Mr. President, the host said, Donald Trump has been making the rounds again. This time he's saying, you're Harvard. Law degree isn't worth much. That it's basically a piece of paper. The crowd reacted instantly. A wave of laughter, groans, and scattered applause rippled through the studio. Some people shook their heads in disbelief. Others shouted things. You couldn't quite make out over the noise. Buried beneath it all was that unmistakable hum of tension. Because everyone in that room knew that when you bring up Trump in front of Obama, you're not just tossing out a question, you're inviting history back into the room. Obama's face was unreadable at first. He didn't frown. He didn't laugh. Just sat there, one hand resting lightly on the arm of the chair, the other on his knee, eyes locked on the host. It was that familiar Obama look, measured, almost amused, like he was already 3 steps ahead and just deciding how much of his response he wanted to reveal. The host leaned back, almost theatrically, and raised his eyebrows as if to say, well, what's it going to be? And in that moment, the studio was split between 2 possibilities. On the one hand, Obama could shrug it off, crack a joke about Trump's spelling mistakes on Twitter or his failed casinos, get the laugh, and move on. That would have been the easy play, the safe play. On the other hand, he could fire back, go full serious, defend his credentials, remind everyone of his years teaching constitutional law, of the fact that he once ran the Harvard Law Review. That kind of answer would have drawn applause from the crowd, no doubt, but it also risked sounding defensive. And here's the thing about Obama. He almost never takes the obvious route. The pause stretched just long enough to let the tension build. The cameras zoomed closer. The audience got quieter. You could feel the air in the room get heavier. Like everyone collectively held their breath, Obama finally leaned forward, just slightly, his smile flickering into view. It wasn't wide. It wasn't forced. It was the kind of smile that says, "I've got something for you." Now the anticipation was unbearable. People weren't just waiting for words. They were waiting for a moment. Because if there's one thing audiences have learned over the years, it's that Barack Obama doesn't waste his lines. When he finally delivers, it tends to be clean, sharp, and devastatingly precise. And so the setup was complete. Asterisk, a host dangling. Trump's insult like bait, an audience hanging on every second of silence. A former president sitting there with that look on his face, the one that always precedes a clapback, people will still be quoting. Years later, the opening exchange had all the ingredients of a viral moment before Obama even said a word. This is where the artistry of politics as performance really shines, because what happened next wasn't just about fact-checking Trump or defending a degree. It was about control. Who controls the narrative? Who gets the laugh? Who walks away looking like the sharper, cooler, more confident figure? Trump, for all his dominance on social media and at rallies, has never mastered this particular arena. On Twitter, he can rant unchecked. At rallies, he commands the room. But in a setting like this late-night TV, where timing, tone, and wit matter as much as substance, Obama has the advantage. It always has. And that's why in the seconds before he spoke, you could feel the imbalance tilting. You could feel the weight of expectation pushing in his direction. The crowd wanted him to land the hit. Host wanted it. Even the cameras seemed to lean in closer, hungry for the payoff. When the words finally came, they didn't just sting, they detonated. But that's the next chapter, because in this part of the story, we're still perched on the edge of the cliff. The host has set the trap. The audience is primed. Obama is ready. And Trump's insult, his dismissal of Obama's Harvard law. Degree hangs in the air like a challenge waiting to be shattered. The room is tense. The stage is set, and the moment is seconds away from exploding. When Obama finally opened his mouth, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't scowl, didn't even break stride. He leaned back in his chair, tilted his head ever so slightly, and said, "Well, let's just say I didn't exactly apply to Trump University." Boom. The audience lost it. Applause, laughter, cheers, an entire studio erupting in that way only a perfectly timed burn can ignite. The host practically folded over his desk, slapping the cards in his hand against the table, his face twisted in laughter. And here's the thing, Obama didn't crack a grin until a full beat later. He let the reaction wash over the room before giving the tiniest shrug, like, "What did you expect me to say?" That restraint, that patience, was the real mic drop. Because in one line, he didn't just defend his Harvard degree, he flipped Trump's insult back on him, dragging the former president's most embarrassing scam into the spotlight, the notorious Trump University. A program so fraudulent that it got shut down and ended with a $25 million settlement. In other words, Trump tried to clown Obama's credentials, and Obama countered with a live reminder that Trump's own educational empire was literally a courtroom punchline. That's surgical precision. The host leaned in, still laughing, and asked, "So you're saying Harvard was a little more legit?" Obama smiled wider now, finally allowing himself to enjoy the moment. "Well," he said, "I'll put it this way. When you graduate from Harvard Law, you walk away with a degree. When you graduate from Trump University, you walk away with a lawsuit." The studio howled. People were on their feet. You could hear the kind of laugh that isn't just humor, it's relief. The audience felt like they'd witnessed someone finally puncture the balloon, someone with enough calm confidence to put Trump's bluster in perspective. And that's why the clip exploded online the next morning. Within hours, it was trending on Twitter, clipped and captioned across TikTok, and replayed endlessly on YouTube. Headlines called it everything from Obama's savage response to the moment that silenced the room. Legal analysts weighed in, saying it wasn't just a joke, it was a direct, pointed reminder of character, credibility, and history. Trump, of course, couldn't let it go. By sunrise, he was raging on Truth Social, typing out a furious response in all caps about fake news, disrespect, and overrated Obama. But the thing about these viral moments is that the reply almost never lands. By the time Trump was typing, the narrative had already been set, and here's what made Obama's move so devastating. It wasn't just funny, it was rooted in fact. Everyone in that audience knew about Trump University. Everyone remembered the lawsuits, the headlines, the image of students who'd been promised success and ended up with worthless binders full of curriculum. It was real history, and Obama weaponized it with a smile. That's the contrast. Trump insults with volume, with spectacle, with sheer force of personality. Obama counters with restraint, precision, and a scalpel-sharp delivery that leaves less room for rebuttal.
One comes off as chaos, the other as control.
And in the theater of politics, control always wins the clip battle. But it wasn't just the clapback itself that stunned people. It was what it represented. Think about it. Here was a former president, years out of office. He's no longer in the trenches of day-to-day politics, still demonstrating a mastery of timing and tone that many active politicians can't touch. It reminded viewers why he was so effective in the first place, not just because of policy, but because of presence. And for Trump, that's the part that stings the most. He thrives on being the loudest guy in the room, the center of attention. But when Obama speaks, he doesn't need to shout. He doesn't even need to say much. A single line, a single smile, and the spotlight shifts instantly. By the end of the segment, the host had basically surrendered the show to the moment. He was laughing so hard he barely got to the next question, and when he did, the crowd was still buzzing. Obama, meanwhile, just leaned back in his chair, calm as ever. The picture of someone who knew he'd landed a blow that would echo far beyond the studio walls, and echo it did. Clips of the exchange popped up on law school social. Media accounts, professors praising the elegance of the counterpunch. Late-night competitors replayed the moment with envy. Memes flooded Instagram Obama in sunglasses, captions about Harvard Law versus Trump U. Even professional comedians admitted it was the kind of line you dream about landing on live TV. But here's the deeper truth. It wasn't just about a joke. It was about legacy. Obama's degree has always been shorthand for intellect, discipline, and achievement. Trump's university has always been shorthand for the opposite of her promises, underdelivery, and lawsuits. By putting those two symbols side by side, Obama didn't just clap back, he reframed the entire insult as proof of the gulf between them. And that's why the legal experts on CNN and MSNBC weren't just laughing, they were nodding. They saw it for what it was, a rhetorical checkmate. Obama didn't defend his degree, he didn't have to. He put the weight of history, credibility, and facts against Trump's insult. And the scales tipped instantly. When the segment finally wrapped and the credits rolled, the host turned to Obama and said, half-jokingly, "You know that's going to be everywhere tomorrow, right?" Obama just smiled again. "I've been on the internet before." The audience roared one last time, and the show cut to black. And in that final moment, you could almost feel the symmetry. Years ago, at the White House Correspondents Dinner, Obama roasted Trump in a way that many believe planted the seed for Trump's obsession with the presidency. And now, here they were again, Obama on stage, Trump reduced to shouting from the sidelines. The burn once again echoing louder than any insult that came before it. The story came full circle. So when people say Obama stunned legal experts, they're not exaggerating. They're recognizing that in an era of endless noise, it's rare to see a comeback that's both witty and substantive. It's both entertaining and devastatingly accurate. And that's why this clip isn't just another late-night laugh. It's another entry in the long, strange, and very personal saga between Barack Obama and Donald Trump. The rivalry that started with conspiracy theories and roast jokes has now stretched across presidencies, court cases, and viral clips. And as long as both men keep trading blows, indirectly you can bet the world will keep watching, waiting for the next explosion. Because in politics, moments like these aren't just entertainment. They're reminders of power, presence, and the fine line between showmanship and statesmanship. And in this round, Obama walked away with the knockout. What do you think was that Obama's sharpest clapback yet, or do you have another moment in mind? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next political showdown we break down here.